Get ready for the alarm bells. Historically speaking, commodities go through cycles of booms and busts, just like any other asset. When they are overvalued, they decline. Today, however, the fundamentals have been largely thrown out the window, instead replaced by central bank actions, and sometimes just their words, with the prospect of $10 oil. We have to realign our thinking to what exactly could be possible. A crisis is brewing before our very eyes, one which will continue to expand for as far as the eye can see. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to talk about oil among other things. Let's get into this right away as we look at this Washington Times article. First, we'll discuss this. The federal government will be flirting with $30 trillion in debt within a decade. That's according to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office. And they make a few statements within this article. There are 2 significant points that I want to make throughout this. They get into all the numbers and talking about how, yes, Obamacare is costing jobs, it is costing more money, and yes, in fact, it was 40% less people applying than they predicted initially, and that's with all the fraud that's going on, so it's even a lot worse off than that. Well, of course, people don't have the money to spend on it. It's not free. We've established that a long time ago. This right here is part of the same article further down, and I actually had to laugh out loud at this. The economic front is somewhat brighter for Mr. Obama, Emperor Obama to you, who's 7 years into the recovery, it's not a recovery, will finally see significant sustained growth of 2.5% this year and 2.6% next year. So I'll stop right there. Just wanted to mention the fact that we haven't seen any growth yet. So, the way that they write the article suggests that they're already growing, but I'm not sure where they're getting that information from because there hasn't been any growth since the financial crisis. And then, of course, they say, later down the road, they say this every time, later down the road, you're going to have less growth. But for now, it's going to be decent amounts of growth. It's later down the road that we're going to have bad growth. And I read this over and over again, and people believe it. It's really, really sad to see it all happen. Now, this article here always messes around. Let me try to find that piece again. Here we go. Talking about oil here out of the LA Times. The price could go even lower because of a worldwide glut being made worse by the end of the sanctions against Iran that have been kept from exporting its oil. And again, I've talked about that quite a bit. I'm not going to mention it in this article, in this video. The chief executive of BP, check this out, he warned last week that it wasn't inconceivable for crude to drop to $10 a barrel in the first half of the year before moving back up. Huge. So this individual obviously has an incentive to keep the oil price up to some degree at least. And he's saying, it's possible that it could go down to $10 a barrel. Mike Maloney used that same number of $10 a barrel. You may have seen the video for yourself. Interesting. Not necessarily saying that it's going to go to $10 a barrel, but there's no reason why it can't continue to move down from where it is. And it hasn't been at this level for many, many years. The EIA said that they believe that it's going to average about $40 this year. That means it would have to go up from where it is. I don't see any reason for it to go up at this time, but that certainly could happen. Now, in my book, I talked about international tension thickening, and I'm talking about sanctions here, talking about a little bit of war in this situation. As the West is putting increasing pressure on Syria, including sanctions which make it difficult to do trade, Russia and China's leaders have publicly opposed these actions. Their message was very clear. Outside forces should not interfere in the internal processes of the country. countries of that region. Russia and China have vested interest in Middle East and North Africa and other parts of Africa as well as business partners. And they're talking about Libya here and everything. This is from my book. And basically what I tried to mention here is, number one, the sanctions, and number two, how we have these geopolitical ties that sometimes are broken, but sometimes are further solidified as actions take place. And we've seen this with all the currency swaps and everything else, that China has been really partnering up with a lot of countries. And you see Russia and Syria definitely partnering up. Hold on to that thought as I get into the next few articles. And again, this right here is moving around on me, this article, but out of the LA Times, I'll try to get to the same information I was looking at before. Banks have lived through 6 years of zero interest rates. Any increase at all is better than what banks have been dealing with. And what we're talking about, of course, here is the Fed funds rate, the interest rates essentially. And they've said that if they can increase them a little bit, as they did, and the market didn't react too horribly to it, that this is a good thing for banks. They can, make some profits at this point. Even with slightly higher rates, though, the threat of global slowdown could push banks to take a cautious approach, tightening their lending standards to guard against the possibility of a recession. That is what they should do. However, I continuously see them loosening the lending standards. That's what they did all the way up throughout the boom, throughout the 2000s. And, there's no reason why they're not going to just continue to do this. They did so in China and use this as a promotional tool to say, don't worry, everything's fine. We're just going to loosen the standards. I'd expect banks to become more conservative as prospective losses erode their confidence. I would expect many banks to stand back a bit to assess what is happening. I really don't see this happening at all. Personally, I see them constantly taking more risks, constantly taking on more derivatives and more schemes, and they're not giving that up anytime soon. Check this out, Financial Times. It is reasonable for investors to wonder whether the Fed's December rate hike was a policy error. And this is a very high individual from JP Morgan. Historically, the Fed has raised rates because either growth or inflation was uncomfortably high. This time is different. Growth is slow, wage growth is limited, and deflation is being imported. What have I talked about consistently? That all along with this whole Fed rate hike, that there's no real reason to do so if they're going by their typical methods, because the growth isn't good. But they had to, perhaps to save face, perhaps they were testing the markets, but they know they can't bring it up to a significant level at this time without intentionally crashing the markets. Now, there is more in here, but I'd like to move on to this. Secretary of State John Kerry said in Davos that sanctions against Russia could be removed in a period of a few months. They want to get their political ties back with Russia. They want to actually suggest this. Moscow has chosen to trade East Ukraine for sanctions relief to save their plummeting economy. I believe that with the effort and the bona fide legitimate intent to solve the problem on both sides, it is possible in the next months to get a place where sanctions can be appropriately removed. We could suggest that what has been happening with the price of oil has allowed them to bend a little bit, but we don't know what's really going on the inside. If that is the case, then partially, at least in this case, they were very successful. Because, of course, we know the real true reason why oil has declined is specifically because they're forcing it down. It's not the glut that we're talking about. That has an impact, absolutely. But it doesn't bring the price down to where they're suggesting that it could go to $10 a barrel. That doesn't happen from over $100 to $10 because of a glut. Unless the glut was so massive, but it wouldn't happen in such a short period of time. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Of course, I'd really appreciate it if you're watching these videos to become a subscriber. We have over 30,000 subscribers. I did read all your comments there the other day and really do appreciate that. Thank you all who have joined over the years, who have stuck with me all of this time to get your news and information. Absolutely take this information, use it to your advantage. Go out there, make your own videos, have other viewpoints that you want to know, you want to see, use those as well. It's very important to get a wide variety of news sources out there. Last but not least, I would say that if you found this video informative, then you will definitely find my book, The Money GPS, even more informative. You can actually flip through the pages of the book. If you go over to Amazon, they have a look inside feature, which will allow you to do that. Take care.